just for clarification. At midnight last night, the highway program and the American people suffered a major loss because of a calculated decision that politics should trump common sense. I've often thought that congressional inaction is a good thing sometimes, but in this case, we failed miserably to do our jobs. As a result, we're unable to pass the 3-month extension of the highway program that Senator Boxer and I were pushing. Now, it's very interesting you have a combination like that. Senator Boxer is a very proud liberal Democrat. I'm a very proud conservative Republican. And we both agree that one of the major functions of government is infrastructure, and right now we have a crumbling infrastructure. So our failure to work together to fix the rescission, which was $8.7 billion of highway money, before midnight yesterday has resulted in the following. Up to 17,000 jobs could be lost because states may be forced to cancel $500 million worth of projects. We're now stuck with a 30-day extension that cuts highway spending by 25%. Compared to 2009, the 3-month extension would have funded the 2010 equal to 2009. The short length of this extension is now going to create uncertainty and erratic funding for the states, who are going to delay projects and gear down the letting of contracts. I have to say this too. There'll be contracts due to this 25% reduction. They're going to have to be defaulted on. There are going to be lawsuits. There are going to be all kinds of problems that will result from this. Now, it's not just my state of Oklahoma. I'm sure the state of Alabama and other states are having a crumbling infrastructure that needs to be addressed. I was on the phone with Gary Ridley. Gary Ridley, he was our highway director for many years, and I always said he was the best highway director in the country. He's now our Oklahoma's transportation secretary, and he gave me the impact of our failure to act just on my state of Oklahoma. He said Oklahoma would normally receive $53.6 million in federal money, but instead will likely only receive $36 million. That's the 25% reduction. They have a $28 million bond obligation, which leaves them only about $8 million for letting projects instead of $26 million. This means that they will likely only be able to let 3 or 4 projects in November, the first letting of the year, and probably none in December. That's my guess, and that was his guess. Now, here is the real world impact of what we do here. This will be devastating for construction workers in Oklahoma and will be repeated, I think, in every state. This may come as a surprise to those in the other body who have said that this will not have no effect on states. They're the ones over there in the House who made it impossible for us to send something over there and get it complied with. And I've been trying to pass a long-term extension with a rescission fix since July. At that point, opposition by the congressmen and senators from both sides of the aisle prevented taking care of the problem. Now, our attempts to set a prudent length for highway extension has been plagued by some people's unrealistic expectation that we can complete a 6 years transformational highway bill and plug the $150 billion shortfall in the next 3 months if we keep the pressure on. Well, we don't even have the 3 months now as of midnight last night. So we're looking at 30 days, and it obviously can't be done. So we may have to repeat what we did just a few years ago. Between the years of 2003 and 2005, we had a series of short-term extensions where you can't do any funding planning in advance, and that's kind of where we are today. Now, I was proud to be the chairman of the Environment Public Works Committee in 2005 when we had a very robust transportation reauthorization bill. Now, taking up an extension is always problematic. Unfortunately, some view this as an opportunity to make a point. There are those on my side of the aisle who won't hesitate to hold the entire highway program hostage in order to enumerate yet again their distaste for congressionally directed spending on highway projects. At the same time, the majority leadership has known for months this was coming, but was unable to force the issue and take the time to have votes on this important issue. This could have been resolved weeks ago if they would have invested in it. Fixing the rescission would increase the deficit by just under $500 million. This is very significant. The other body wanted an offset for this, and they were right, and so did I. We wanted an offset. I think the most reasonable offset is unused stimulus funds. I've stated all along that there was not enough there in the stimulus bill to actually stimulate the economy. In fact, I had amendments during the debate on the stimulus bill that would put almost triple the amount of money that would go into highway construction. Those are real jobs. That would be very meaningful. But anyway, according to the CBO's most recent analysis that was done about a month ago, only $85 billion of stimulus funds have actually been spent. Furthermore, less than 60% of the stimulus funds have even been obligated, leaving $150 billion in unobligated balances. Now, money being unobligated means that they do not have a plan for how they're going to spend it, and are now nowhere near doing so. This is clearly not stimulating the economy. It makes sense to move a fraction of this money to something that will actually save jobs. In this case, 17,000 jobs we can identify. It's something that would stimulate the economy and give us something at the end of the day for our money. It is a perfect source to pay for fixing the recession. In fact, Senator Vitter's approach from last July was to actually give President Obama's OMB, that's Office of Management and Budget, the discretion to pick which stimulus funds would be cut. So he didn't care which ones were cut. It's just we need to put these stimulus funds to work and create jobs. So they couldn't cut the things that they're not working or were just congressional pet programs. This is simply cutting the worst 1% of the stimulus, something everybody should be able to agree to, whether or not you voted for the stimulus, which I didn't. But the other side blocked this approach in a show of partisanship. So Senator Boxer and I brokered a bipartisan agreement to use TARP funds, the Troubled Asset Relief Program. Now, to me, this made sense because this would have offset the amount of money that would be lost in the recession fix, is a way of doing it. And it would have actually taken care of the problem. Some people thought that this would have somehow affected the deficit, but it wouldn't. It meant that we would reduce TARP authority by $8.7 billion, which would reduce the deficit by $4.35 billion, according to CBO. Putting aside politics, penciling this out shows that $4.35 billion in deficit reduction, minus the cost of the rescission, $500 million, means the deficit savings of just under $4 billion. And I thought this was a good thing. We would preserve up to 17,000 jobs and reduce the deficit. Clearly a win-win solution, I thought. And I thought this up until late last night because I thought we were going to be able to do it, but there were objections. We reduced funding for a program that was a bad idea from the inception. I opposed it initially. And we're talking about the TARP program. I voted against it. A lot of these people who are complaining about the amount of money being spent voted for the $700 billion bailout, as it's often referred to. But I didn't. I opposed it. And some people supported it, thinking the government buying so-called toxic assets was necessary. But then when this money was given to unaccountable bureaucrats, it was used for buying insurance companies, car companies, and bailing out banks. But some of my conservative colleagues oppose this approach because they want to use TARP money for debt reduction. And I agree with that. As I just pointed out, the compromise that Senator Boxer and I were pushing would have resulted in a net reduction of the deficit of about $4 billion. Even as I say this, I honestly don't understand their opposition. The problem of those who talk about using TARP funds were willing to stimulate the funds, but the Democrats refused to do that. So we came up with another idea. Let's go ahead and use stimulus funds. And if we use stimulus funds, that would have, I think, overcome the objections that were on the floor last night. And I felt that was a good idea. Unfortunately, the Democrats did not want to do that. So I think we've tried, and I think it kind of demonstrates that it was a serious problem. We had a fix, and the Republicans and the Democrats were equally responsible for not getting it. Now we're going to pay the price. And I don't know that the problem is worse in Oklahoma. It's probably not. It's about the same throughout the nation. But those, and speaking now as a conservative, one who's always ranked in the top 2 or 3 conservatives, I've always felt conservatives can be big spenders in some areas. One is defending America. as I talked about just a few minutes ago, and the other is in our infrastructure. That's a function that our government's supposed to perform. So I think we failed last night. Hopefully we'll find some way to overcome this problem and get back on track. So I want to thank Senator Boxer and Secretary LaHood. They both tried very hard. We talked and worked for many hours on this. There are countless others on both sides of the aisle that worked together to try to fix this problem. We didn't do it. Let's hope that we can do it shortly. I yield the floor.